Hey guys, welcome to sportsbookreview.com. Natalie Rydstrom here. Returning guest Joao from MGTennisTipster is with us. We're covering the 27th US Open, and we have special guest with us. Whale Kappa is with us. We're going to discuss the draw today. Whale Kappa, nice to have you on board. How's it going?
It's going so well. Thank you. This is a great surprise and I appreciate the offer to be here today. Very excited about the U.S. Open and wishing you guys all the best of luck and enjoying every minute of this.
Well, thank you very much. Great to have you on board. I also know as well you specialize in NFL. Obviously, that is just around the corner, right? You're gearing up for that as well. Is this how do you manage to juggle the U.S. Open and the NFL?
Well, the NFL, yeah, we're 2 weeks out from the kickoff of the NFL season, and I've been putting in homework pretty much all summer, and I'm ready for it. So I've got my week one pretty much already capped, and that's really that's the only juggling you have to do. As long as week one is you're ready to go, then you can kind of focus on tennis. And tennis and NFL are two totally different animals because you have to be watching tennis regularly and
Yeah.
following daily. Whereas with NFL, there are 16 games and you have a whole week to prepare. And it's a lot more kind of finding the information and breaking down matchups and kind of, looking for key numbers and inefficiencies in the market and stuff like that. Whereas tennis, it's more, it's a little more tactile and it's daily. And, so it's a good balance.
Yeah. Now, for those who want to follow Whale Kappa, it's whale_underscore Kappa, which is his Twitter handle. And you also do podcasts, I believe, as well, all which is available on your Twitter handle.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. We just started doing an NFL gambling focused podcast, and we've covered all the divisions so far. There's 5 episodes up on iTunes or up on SoundCloud, and you can find all the links at my Twitter page.
Fantastic stuff. And for our returning viewers, we all know Joao from MGTennisTipster.com. Been with us for several years now. I tell you, this man, Whale Kappa, lives, breathes, eats, sleeps, you name it, tennis. I don't think he actually sleeps, do you? Like Joao, you cover every single tennis tournament known to man. And here we are on the final Grand Slam. How are you doing? How are you bearing up?
Not every tournament. I don't follow much the ATF tournaments, but besides those, yeah, it has been a long season. We're heading into the final months of the year. We have the US Open, then we have the Asian Swing, and also a couple of tournaments on indoor before the end of the year. But we're halfway there, more than halfway, and we're hoping to have a good US Open.
Yeah, well, we've done pretty well over the 3 Grand Slams. It's the final Grand Slam. Let's discuss the draw, who it's favoured. Let's start over on the women's side, and it's kind of been up in the air, obviously, since Serena Williams became pregnant. It's kind of been a bit open. One player, though, I definitely want to talk about is Venus Williams. Obviously, she's on her home soil, and I'm surprised to see her as a distant here. You can get odds as high as 21, low as 17 there with Bet365. Why is she so low? Question over to you, Joao.
Yeah, the main reason because she has such a high price to win the tournament is due to her recent performances in the US Open Series in Toronto and Cincinnati. She had some poor losses against Svitolina and Ashley Barty, and that's the main reason why her price is so high. However, she has been doing very well throughout 2017 on the major events, reached the final in the Australian Open and also in Wimbledon. And at the age of 37, she's a player who tends to focus on the big tournaments. So on the Grand Slams, you know that the best Venus will show up, and on the other tournaments, we can have some poor performances from her, like we had in the net, as we mentioned. But I believe that in the US, she'll show up at a good level, and she's definitely a contender. And after her recent performances in Melbourne and in London, she can create some damage. And the price at 21 seems a pretty interesting one before the tournament starts.
Exactly. Well, she made the finals, didn't she, in Wimbledon? And I'm really surprised to see. Is this like a cash out option at the very least, obviously, as she progresses, makes a deep run in the US Open? What's your thoughts there, Whale Kappa?
It probably will be, and I don't see any problem backing her at the current prices. It's very nice, and she got a favorable draw. I think she's got a very favorable head-to-head record against Caroline Wozniacki. So I think at a minimum, you're looking at Venus making the quarterfinals. Unfortunately for her, she would be matched up with Gabrielle Muguruza in the quarterfinal. And as we saw in the Wimbledon final, Muguruza has the tools to really give her a hard time. And, you know, I think the points made about Venus were spot on. I think a lot of what you saw in the run-up to the U.S. Open, her poor play was mostly born out of, you know, wear and tear of the season to this point. She is by far and away the oldest player among the contenders. And but she gets an extra day rest between her matches at the U.S. Open, and I think that's something that makes her worthwhile backing in the futures market. And you know, if things break right for her, and somebody like Caroline Garcia shocks Muguruza, and you're looking at Venus potentially making a semifinal, and she can beat a lot of the women in the bottom half in the fourth quarter as well. And she loves playing in front of the crowd in Flushing Meadows. So
yeah.
It's a good place to start capping the women's side.
Yeah, well, Muguruza, obviously, she's favourite right now to win the tournament, 5 with Bet365. Obviously, she comes from the Cincinnati win. Also, obviously, like you said, they're winning Wimbledon. It will be a tough match for Venus. Yeah, that will be tough. What about Madison Keys, though? Slightly lower there in price. You get 13 with Bet365. Again, on her home turf. Does this play quite an important factor? I know, like sort of other sports, you know, playing on your home turf is a big thing here. Does this apply with tennis, Well Kappa?
I would say yes. The U.S. women especially seem to really get buoyed by the crowd support in New York, and because they tend to play the most meaningful matches kind of in prime time with a really full, loud stadium. I do think it helps a lot. And Madison Keys, if she's fit, and I know she had some wrist injuries that limited her a little bit in Cincinnati, that I'm going to be watching carefully to see if she can overcome that. But she's on a collision course with maybe the hottest women's tennis player right now, not named Muguruza, in Alina Svitolina. And that's going to be a popcorn match if they manage to meet in round 4, Keys versus Svitolina.
Yeah. What are your thoughts of the favourites there, Joao, heading in? And obviously, who is the draw favoured? Who should we be looking at to make the full run?
Yeah, regarding the favorites and the draw, I think that Karolina Pliskova had a pretty decent draw. On her quarter, she has Svetlana Kuznetsova and Agnieszka Radwanska as the tough opponents. Although Radwanska has a huge edge on the head-to-head, I believe something like 7-0 or 8-0. That was before Pliskova becoming the player that she is today, and also in a time where Radwanska was more dominant than she is at the moment. Although she's doing a good run in New Haven, playing the semifinals today, she's not as dominant as she was in the past 6-7 years, and Pliskova can do a good run here. The other main favorite is Garbiñe Muguruza, as you mentioned. She's a player who doesn't like to play on this event, although she's a big match player with a great record on Grand Slam events. Her record in Wimbledon in the US is extremely poor throughout her career. She played 4 times in the US Open, only won 2 matches. She doesn't seem to handle very well the conditions here, and with the pressure of being the main favorite, if she managed to survive the first rounds and reaches the second week, I think that she can go all the way and win the tournament. But the first week will be the biggest problem for her, and she might be surprised for some tough opponents. As well mentioned, she has Caroline Garcia in her quarter. She also has in the opening round the American Varvara Lepchenko. She can play very well in a good day. Left-handed is always tricky to play against those players. So I think that Garbiñe is the player who can experience some problems, not mainly because of the tough draw that she has, but because of the poor record and the pressure that she has after winning Wimbledon and Cincinnati.
Yeah, would you put Muguruza as the favorite right now? Is it a price that you would back, the 5 Bet365?
No, only if she reaches the second week. I think that the price won't suffer many changes. Should be around 3.54 if she reaches that stage. So waiting for the second week, because it wouldn't be surprised to see her losing in the opening rounds.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts there, Well Kappa, on the outrights right now?
No, I agree 100%. Muguruza seems to be about appropriate priced, if not a little bit maybe she should have been around probably 7-1 or plus, plus 700, plus 800. I don't think there's really any value there. And as mentioned, she does not play well in the U.S. And the fact that you could say that to a degree she's achieved what the best that she could have hoped for this season. And the idea that she's going to continue to just run through the women's field, I think is I don't put a lot of credibility in that. I think someone's going to surprise her and presumably make a nice spot for Venus Williams.
So who you think is Venus Williams that could lift the trophy here?
Well, out of the outrights, she's my favorite but mostly because of the number. I like Svitolina. I like Svitolina a lot too. She seems to, coming into the 2017 season, I really thought like something was going to break right for her eventually this season, and she was going to win her first slam. And here we are. It's the last of the slams, and so if not this one, then it's obviously not happening for her this year. But I love her style of play. It really does seem to suit these conditions, and I like her draw a lot. And she gets by keys. The bottom half of her quarter is not no one out of that bottom half is scaring me much. So I think Svitolina has a very great run to get to the semifinals. And if she faces the likes of a Pliskova there, I like Svitolina in that spot a lot. And so I would say of the outrights, I like Svitolina the best.
Okay, interesting stuff. I agree with you as well. Actually, I was expecting and hoping that Venus would win a Grand Slam, especially with her sister out. But also talking about conditions, we'll quickly talk about conditions, and then we'll head over. We've got lots of comments here on the men's side, so this is the anticipated part of the conversation. But obviously, New York, it's very hot. Are there, we have to sort of take these sort of conditions into mind here. Are there players that favor well under the heat? Should we, I don't know, should we rule out the British, for example, who don't often get to experience the heat too much? Is this something we have to take into consideration? And who might the temperature affect the most?
Well, I would say it's more important to take it into account on a match-to-match as opposed to thinking about it in terms of the outright markets. You want to see how the schedule plays out, how the order of play stacks up. If somebody gets you could say, well, yeah, Konta is, not suited for these conditions, and so why would you back her on the outrights? But she might get, the last slot on the order of play. Every day in the important matches, and it happens to be 70 degrees and the humidity is dropped off because they play a lot of these matches pretty late for New York time at least. So,
right.
I don't know. I would look at it more on a match by match basis, and if you see someone who you're concerned about their fitness level and they're playing in the heat of the day, then it's absolutely a stay away.
All right, good tip. Would you agree with that, Joao?
Yeah, the schedule of play is the key to when looking at, for example, the heat. And also when looking at the schedule of play, you have, for example, a match that it's, for example, the third match of the day, they'll say will not be played before 4 p.m., for example, but you have to take in consideration the previous matches, if those matches are expected to be long or not, because that will affect the match. That only says it will not be played before 4 p.m., but most of the times only starts at 5 or 6. So if you're considering that, also taking into account the previous matches and if those will be long or not is also something that's important to keep in mind.
All right, great stuff. Heading over now to men's singles, and quite a few players out. Obviously, Djokovic, Wawrinka, Nishikori, and Raonic, and a lot of the top players. They've a lot of sort of problems, really, injury problems. But we do have a sort of list here. A younger player, Zverev, on the list. And reading in the comments, he is many people's favourites here to go the full distance in the U.S. Open. Is it his time? Is this US Open his time, or should we expect more from him next year? Take us through your thoughts, World Cupper.
It very well could be. The draw favors him very, very well. The whole bottom half. There are only a handful of players that are particularly fit for a match against Zverev, who's playing some of the best tennis of his career. this summer, and he's won 2 Masters this year, which is just amazing. I don't think you could have. This is a guy that came into the Australian Open at 66-1, and was, if you had said to me in January, Zverev is going to win 3 titles this year, 2 Masters, and be the 3rd favorite for the U.S. Open, I would have been, you're thinking of the wrong year. This is not 2020. This is still Djokovic and Murray's tour. But here we are now, and Zverev, he has to be considered the favorite of all of the men on the bottom half of this draw to make the final. I think I haven't seen the prices yet for him to win the 3rd quarter, but I'm going to guess that Zverev is probably going to be around -175, or in UK terms, that's what, like $1.66 or something like that, or a dollar. Some price like that to come out of this quarter, which is pretty amazing. And in the semifinal, there's certainly no one in the 4th quarter that I think stacks up against him, which means you could be looking at a pretty fresh young fella in the final against whoever manages to win the battle of attrition, which is the top half of this draw.
Yeah, and we obviously, the 2 favorites that stands as follows: Federer and Nadal. Federer has had a great season with the Grand Slams, but we were talking earlier, Joao, and you were sort of saying, these top players, they do have injuries to their list. Can they fight through? Is Federer going to win the last Grand Slam of the season? His play lends well to the hard court of the US Open. Obviously, Nadal often referred to as the king of clay, but Federer, is this his to lose, or are we going to see the young, fit buck kind of take the trophy from him instead?
Well, it's very unpredictable how the top players will appear in New York. Federer withdrew from Cincinnati due to a back problem. He already mentioned that he's still not at 100%. Nadal experienced some knee problems. I believe it was in yesterday's practice session against Fernando Verdasco. During that session, he grabbed his knee. He seemed to be feeling some pain there, and is also something to keep in mind. And he also has been far from impressive throughout the US Open series. Also, Andy Murray has been struggling with a hip injury throughout the last couple of weeks. And when looking at these 3 players' prices, if I had to pick one to place a bet at this moment, due to all the uncertainties, would have to be on Murray at 9.5 at Pinnacle, because it's too high for a player like him who can go far on Grand Slams. It's all about his physical condition. If he's fit, he can create some problems, as well as Federer and Nadal, without any doubt. But due to the current prices, it would have to be on Murray. About Zverev, what you were talking about earlier. He's doing a great run in the US Open Series, won Washington, won Montreal. He's a very promising young player, but he doesn't have yet the experience on the Grand Slam events. He never made it into the quarterfinals. He can go far on this event. It wouldn't be surprising, without any doubt, if he wins this tournament. He has a good draw, as well mentioned. Has a couple of big servers there who can create some problems, such as Kevin Anderson, Gilles Muller, or even John Isner. Those can be some tough opponents. Even Marin Cilic, if he's recovered from his recent physical problems, he can also be a tough opponent on these courts. He can play very well, as he did in 2014. But Zverev can also go all the way. However, due to his lack of experience on Grand Slam events and the fact that he hasn't been able to reach the quarterfinals yet in his career, I think that the price for him to win the title, only at 7.5, it's not enough, at least for me, to get involved on him, although I won't be surprised if he wins the title.
And what about Will Capper's thoughts there to win his quarter? Obviously, the odds aren't out yet, but if it's something that looks quite tempting as far as the price goes, would he be your main contender?
I would need a higher price to get involved. I think Will mentioned that he's expecting 1.66. Around that, I wouldn't get involved. He has although he doesn't have a very tough draw, but to reach the semifinals, he has to beat some tough opponents on the way, and that price won't be enough. And if you bet individually on each match of Zverev, you'll probably get a much better price than that. So taking match by match will be a better approach on that betting in Zverev.
Okay.
Agreed, 100%.
All right, agreed on that one. Now, obviously, the odds on tout, I think we'll be back on Sunday. We discuss some of the actual outright bettings or the quarter bettings and stuff like that. But has anybody got any like early picks? Anything they want to discuss? Start with you, Well Kappa.
Well, the early lines, some of these lines that came out were surprising. I was surprised to see that Robin Haas is listed as an underdog to Kyle Edmund. Edmund is going to be playing deep into the Winston-Salem tournament this week and then have to travel up. And Haas has been relatively fresh. He looked great in Montreal, and although obviously got mowed down by Federer. So I would look for Haas as a small underdog in that head-to-head. I thought I'm intrigued by Ryan Harrison actually playing against Thomas Berdych in round one. Harrison is an interesting history at the U.S. Open. He's the kind of player that really, you brought it up earlier about, players responding to the crowd. He really loves playing in front of the U.S. crowd and really does feed off their energy. And if he can get a toe hold in that match against Berdych and, be up a set or 1-1, I could see Harrison pulling off the upset there. And right now he's currently listed as about an underdog at about $4 or plus 400 or so. Those are the only two that really stuck out. I'm going to look, my kind of overall strategy for the head-to-heads in round one is to look for opportunities to back a qualifier whose form is really, really impressive through qualifying, who's playing someone who's either has some injury question marks or hasn't played in a while and may be a little bit, susceptible to the upset. And so we haven't seen who the qualifiers are going to get stacked up against yet, but that's really probably where I'm going to look at most for the opportunities to place head-to-head action in round one.
All right, fantastic stuff. Joao, I know we're discussing it on Monday. Have you got any sort of like early leans, any matches you've got your eye on, or you've not yet looked?
No, but just to mention, I don't have any major matches yet, but to mention what the Whale Capper mentioned, the strategy of going with the qualifiers is also something that presents some value. And I have one to mention that has been doing very well lately, not only on this qualifying, but also on the Challenger Tour. The German Cedric Marcel Stipp, he has been playing very well lately, did a great qualifying. And I think that he can be a tough opponent no matter who he plays. He's a very talented player, has been out for 1 year or so due to injury, but he's a very talented player and has a bright career ahead of him and can do damage on the opening round, regardless of who is his opponent.
All right, great stuff. That wraps things up here. A very exciting US Open about to kick off very soon. Whale Kappa, if you want to follow Whale Kappa, Whale_Kappa is his Twitter handle, podcast, and a regular tweeter. And then also Joao from MGTennisTipster, who many of you will know. We will be back on Sunday with some looks to day one and day two. Whale Kappa, Joao, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us.